All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kings and Priests podcast. My name is Michael. I'm here with my co-host, Dean Sweetman. What's up, Dean?
Everything is up, and except the stock market. Down
I was going to say
776 points as we speak.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just great.
Whatever.
This is such a great feeling to wake up, and see. Hey, we also have a guest with us today, a special guest, a friend of the podcast, Travis Albritton, aka I call the podcast Wizard. Travis, what's up, dude?
Thanks for having me. First time caller, long time listener, and
yes,
just happy to, make some great business ideas happen.
So to give some context here, if you are listening to this episode, a couple of episodes back, Dean and I kind of hashed out briefly this idea that I heard from this podcast, My First Million. It's a great podcast. They hash out business ideas, talk all things business. And one of their ideas that they said somebody should do was, hey, somebody should start a mobile podcasting studio. And of course, like, this is the world I live in. And so I thought, man, this would just be a fun thing to talk about with Dean on the podcast. And so we kind of hashed it out for a few minutes and said, we're going to do another follow-up episode, do some research and talk through it some more. And Travis, you and I were catching up the next day and you were like, man, I've got a whole list of notes and thoughts and ideas for you. And I said, okay, just stop, hold on. When we record next week, jump on with us. So that's kind of what we're doing today. So to give everybody a bit of context, the idea is this. So basically, everybody wants to have a podcast. Podcasting is it's such a great medium to practice trial, whether that's B2B, B2C, low barrier to entry, low cost to start. And in a place like LA or New York or Nashville, where there's a lot of creators, the idea was, could you take an RV? Could you turn it into a mobile podcasting studio? And could you turn that into a business? So that's kind of the overall idea. Do you guys want to, Travis, why don't we jumpstart with you? Why don't you just tell us just like initially your thoughts? Like when you heard the idea, what did you think?
Well, I thought 100% because this business plan has already proven true in a litany of other industries. So when I was listening to it, the first thing I thought was, man, every time I go for a walk in my neighborhood, I'm seeing a mobile car cleaning service. They just come out and detail your car in your driveway. You don't have to go anywhere. You just pull it right in the driveway. Hour later, you got a brand new car, shampooed rugs, the whole
dog grooming, same thing.
Exactly. Just load your, we warn our kids not to get into vans, but dog, go right ahead, get in the dog grooming van, and they come out and they're spiffy clean, and people pay extra for the luxury of not having to interrupt their lives unnecessarily to do something important, right? And so there's always going to be a premium factor when you bring something to the customer, right? That's why you pay $20 for a burrito from DoorDash instead of driving 2 minutes to get it for $10 at the restaurant. It's that convenience factor. And so being able to latch onto something that people are already wanting to do, produce podcasts, and then adding that premium element of, we're going to bring everything to you. You don't even have to buy any gear. You just show up, just write a check, show up. We'll make you a podcast. I think is really, especially if it's not an oversaturated market, I think a really great opportunity.
Okay, cool. Dean, what was I know we talked about it and your initial thought was like, oh, this could work. Have you thought about it anymore?
I have.
And what do you think now?
Did we go to GoDaddy and look for the URL while we're on the podcast, or did we do that after?
I think we did it afterwards. And there were some really good, some good domains.
So this is interesting, the way that business gets birthed, because you get an idea, you get excited, you go and find the URL, and then you're about to click on buying another URL, which may be your like 500th one for the year. And you go, I better think this through. And
I actually did that. I was like, we were looking, I was like, I'm going to buy it right now. And you're like, hold on a second, man. Yeah, take a break.
But that's the standard MO, right? For entrepreneurs. We get it, we're all jacked up. You write about, 6 or 7 lines of notes, and you go find the URL and you go buy it, or in this case, we paused. Because then I started thinking about the costs and some of the way in which some obstacles, which I think is a very good thing to talk about and talk through with people you trust when you're going to start a business, get someone who can give you all the reasons why they think it won't work. And I went there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Okay.
but like any business, what we should do, and we can do it right now, let's just start spitballing on income opportunity and expense to get that income and see if we can get a profit at the end. And I think that's the first thing we should do.
Yep. So I did some research and came up with some basic costs to start this thing up. So should we start there? Maybe of just like, hey, this is what we think the cash would be up front. And then even like a basic minimum of what we think it would cost monthly to run.
So two
I'm gonna
things
run down
for
some of
people
this.
listen: upfront capital, and then ongoing cost, right, to keep the business going. Two different things.
Yep. Okay, so, and I'm not an RV expert, right? Which is kind of like sort of hurdle number one, is that just going on rvtrader.com and searching around, I'm kind of just guessing, what do I need? Do I need a new one? Do I need a used one? Does it matter how many miles are on it, right? Like I'm kind of out of my league there, but I found one that looked like it's 2022 Class C Coachman, is on sale now in Lancaster. I can get one for about $99,000.
Okay, I have my first objection.
So with
instead of a $99,000 fairly brand new RV, could we go for a 1980s Bedford van for $2,000 and achieve the same thing?
Right.
I'm just asking for a friend.
I don't know there's a couple things. I think we could. I think that could be one version of this. I think that's what we have to decide is, do we go high-end premium full service? And I know Travis has some ideas about what full service could include. So I think we could.
Because if you wrapped a
$5,000
van, it would look brand new.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to make sure the engine works. So let's put the $99,000 version and the $5,000 version next to each other, just as a running,
next to each other. Okay.
I'm writing this down.
So to give you an idea, so if we bought the $99,000 and we could put $10,000 down, and our payment would be about $990 a month.
Okay.
If we just got a loan for it, I put down a wrap at about $7,500. We've got a lot of the gear, and again, I'm just like, this was like napkin math, spitballing, like probably another 10 to 20 grand in gear that we need, and to get like the interior looking the way we would want it to look, right? Obviously little things like business formation, domain, that kind of thing. Now, in terms of monthly, so what I have spitballing is around like just under $40,000 in startup costs to do sort of the big version of it. Now, one of those things has to do with.
So you want to lease a $99,000 RV? That's a grand. Yeah.
Buy one.
But you want to pay it off. You only want to put 10% down. Okay.
Yeah. That was my that was an initial thought, to have like startup capital be.
So that's $1,000 a month on your cogs
now.
Right? And so my version is cash $5,000, no payments.
Yep. Right, cash $5,000, no payments, and probably what, $2,500 to wrap.
Yeah, I like that.
Maybe
if it's 7.5 for an RV, let's still call it 2.5. Okay, right, got it. What's our equipment cost inside?
Now,
what's our equipment? Because equipment's going to be about the same, right?
Well, it depends, right? Because you got to think, and Travis, maybe you can speak to this, to do a proper video 4-person setup. Do you have enough room in a van? In other words, what's the product that people are going to want most? Is it 2 to 3 people sitting around a table doing audio with one camera angle? Or is it like a full service, I feel like I'm walking into a podcast studio? Because that's kind of the difference, and that would determine the gear. If it's just audio, I mean, we've got the gear. Right. It would cost us nothing. If we have just the audio and one camera, we basically have the gear. It would cost us nothing. If we wanted to do like a full studio, my guess is between 10 and 20 grand. And that's like including, what do we want the inside of the RV to look like?
What do you think, Travis?
Right.
20 grand for like fit out gear?
Yeah, 20. That would be
Right.
on the high end, where you wouldn't be it, because I think entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic too. Like,
Right,
oh, it'll only cost
exactly.
X, and it's like,
Right.
oh, it's actually double that. So I think if you had earmarked
Yeah.
20K to build out a professional video podcast studio, that would cover everything
Right.
that you need with some margin for things
Yeah.
that you didn't expect. And I have some other. I don't want to get too far off the train of thought, but I have some thoughts on how to make the 5K van work for a large.
I love you already.
Okay. I love that. So
I'm putting 20K down for gear for both, right?
let's
We're
talk
going
about-
to over project on the gear. We're going to go top of the line, and
Okay.
like just gonna. So great.
Okay.
Mhm.
So Travis, you have kind of an idea. Why don't you kind of share your added service that you mentioned to me that was sort of like data processing? In other words, why don't you talk about that? Because that I did some research that adds a bit in a startup fee. So you want to just share that idea quickly?
You're talking about like the different tiers of offerings and like what would go into each, or you're talking about like how to actually
Starlink.
execute it?
Basically,
Starlink,
the Starlink, and then sort of the transfer, the data transfer. thing.
Yeah, so
only because there's a startup cost associated to that.
there is. So if you're gonna have a mobile studio and you're gonna be recording podcasts for people and then giving those recordings back to them, you want to minimize as much hand holding and as much of you just holding onto those files as possible. You just want to record it and
I
then
like
dump
that.
it, and then not have to worry about SD cards and, oh, do we remember to upload it, XYZ. And so the idea was you get Starlink because then you have internet connection anywhere you can drive that thing. And then as soon as it's done recording, boom, you upload it to the client's Dropbox, Google Drive folder, whatever, and the transaction's done. There's no like 2 weeks later, hey, I'm still waiting on my files. Like that's completely over. It's all part of the process of recording while the van is sitting there. And so it's a closed interaction. You're not having to follow up a week, 2 weeks later to make sure that you gave everyone the files they asked for and dumped your SD cards and all that kind of stuff. And there are different switchers and things that you can buy that'll spit out different file types, whether they're combined files, individual files. And yeah, you could have a process for just like record, upload.
Hey, Travis, did we just stumble into a tiered pricing model? So the basic entry model is we record, we send. The second tier is we record, we do post-production and send. You just gave me another idea. We can go straight to live, straight to YouTube with Starlink, right? So there's like variations now of the basics. We just give you the file. And my guess is most people just don't want the file. They're going to want the next service that puts it all onto their social, puts it onto their YouTube. Like, I think there's some tiered pricing we just came on.
Sure. So like full service would be you walk out to the van, record for an hour
And
once
walk
a
away.
week, and you have a podcast on the back end, and it's fully produced, it's uploaded, it's scheduled, there's show notes, there's thumbnails, there's graphics,
That
everything.
my guess will be the
Because-
most popular.
Yes. And you would also want the vehicle they're sitting in to be one they're excited about being in for
True.
an hour. So as long as the $5,000
Yeah,
van is clean,
absolutely.
that'll be key. It can't be like a rust bucket or something you found.
Just to be clear, the only thing old on this old van is the engine. Everything else
engine, there you
looks
go.
like, and if you've got an old model, you can make it a cool
Mhm.
retro, right? It would just look incredible. And
Yeah, you can make it like the mystery machine.
exactly.
Scooby-Doo. Like you can do something like that.
So Steve-O has a podcast that he does in a van.
Who's Steve-O?
And he was one of the guys from
Oh, got it.
Jackass. And so I'm
MTV
trying to
star. Yeah.
I think
MTV
my
guy.
sons watched that.
And yes, totally. Oh yeah.
If they're from our
they
generation,
are.
there's a good chance.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. They were our generation's heroes,
Yeah.
the Jackass guys. But yeah, he's got a podcast called Wild Ride, and it's in a
Nice.
Sprinter van. And so I'm trying to find a photo. Like here's a photo of him with 3
Right.
people
There you
in
go.
there. So I mean, maybe Travis, do you think that a van is big enough?
So it all depends on what the promise is of the service. So if the promise is mobile podcast recording studio, that could either be recorded in the van itself, or we come to you, set everything up, you record it, we break everything down, and we leave. So that would get around the space limitations, you'd have less control over the recording environment. But if you could pull that off with somebody in a Prius, right? They just load everything into a trunk, show up to your office, set everything up, record it, break it down. That would be like a super MVP version where you could even start this thing without the capital expense up front of having to buy a vehicle. That would require more time, like more labor hours, because it wouldn't be as automatic. You'd have to have a person actually manage. It's
not as cool. Like, think about a van,
but it's
right?
not
I think
cool.
the whole vibe of
not
this,
as cool.
I'm trying to think, like, as an investor, right? Like, this is cool. Like, if you got a funky, cool van, wrapped it up, got a great brand thing going. Like, did you guys during COVID, especially like on like TikTok or Insta, there was these couples that would take vans and turn them into homes, and there was tons of those.
Yeah.
Right.
Van life.
And man, they looked incredible. Right. And like, and they were like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. You know, you have this kind of van that you deck out, and instead for living in it, you put a studio in it.
Yeah. Well, if you got one that had a sliding,
which I think is a must,
then you can open that up, and you can have basically the other side of the van be the backdrop of the set, and you could set up the camera outside the van with a wide lens.
Oh yeah,
that would capture everyone inside. So that way you kind of extend the studio outside, but you still have everyone sitting in the van with everything.
Like, what would be cool if you in LA, right? If you like parked in Santa Monica and the beach was behind you, right? You could just have like you could use the backdrop and as part of the thing. So very cool.
Yeah.
You could, instead of trying to hide the fact that you're recording in a van, you could make a fit of the van a character in the show.
Yeah. And if I'm doing a regular podcast, I just always go to that one spot, right? And if you had 20 customers that wanted to do that, you just pick a different spot, so it was all unique.
So okay, let's talk about just quickly, and then Travis, I want you to run down some of these ideas you have and get me and Dean's brains spinning. So some more additional monthly costs, and I'm sure there's more. I didn't get to like what it would cost to pay someone to operate it and some of those things, because I have kind of an idea on that. So insurance is about $1,000 a year on these things. Gas is about $155 per 250 miles. So let's say you're just in LA. I mean, you're probably talking $500 a month in gas potentially to get started. Starlink's $135 a month, and then I put like $300 a month to clean the thing, to just do 3 cleans.
How much for cleaning?
So I did $300 a month, and that could be the person who's operating the thing. You know what I mean? Like a one deep clean a month is probably fine. So without anyone operating it, without any like just hard cost, the basics, and I'm sure there's more, but baseline. In fact, I know there will be more in terms of like on the tech side, but just like the hard cost of the van itself or the RV itself, you're talking like about $2,100 a month if you get one that has a payment on it.
And then so $1,500 if we buy it.
Exactly. Okay, so Travis, what do you got, man? You have some notes. You have some thoughts. Share with us some of your.
So I think because we were talking about like, how do you market this? Like, how do you guerrilla market this thing to like start making it like kind of grow on its own? And one of the ideas that we had that we were batting around offline was finding these collection points of characters that would be like, oh yeah, let's totally just jump in a van and record a podcast. That sounds fun. And thinking about LA, you have like comedy clubs where you could just park the van from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. and just be like, hey, here's a free service. If anybody that's doing an act wants to hop in and chat with another comedian and record something, we'll do it for free. They can just hop in the van and do it. And we'll provide the files.
And this kind of goes to our YouTube or something.
So no, they would do the whole service. Like, here's your files, here's everything, but the idea being that now the van becomes a part of the scene of the comedy clubs, right? That it's like, oh, there's a van here. And if you had it open, or if you were live streaming it or something like that, you could have like a viewing party of the people there. And so almost have like a club next to the club. Not but yeah, and the other thing is the van has to be like obnoxiously interrupting your vision, because there's so many things to look at in LA. So it's got to be like highlighter yellow. It's got to be like reflective. Like, have you seen that those metallic paint that they put on cars where it looks like a mirror?
I see Lamborghinis like that all the time around here. True story.
Right. It's impossible to not look at it. Right. And then you'd have the branding on the side, like, you know, whatever the name of the podcast thing is, and then a giant QR code on every single side of the car. So that all someone has to do is point their phone at the van, open the link, and it's like, hey, why don't you set up a time? And reserve a time. Here are the locations we're going to be at. You can reserve it by putting down a deposit or pre-buying your package. We'll give you a break if you want to do multiple recordings, and then put the link for your cloud storage in here, and we'll be there. And here's kind of the terms and conditions and our refund policy and X, Y, and Z. So it can be a very quick, low friction process. I see the van. That looks cool. QR code, fill out the information. Here's my credit card. And then now you have it all built into a scheduler so the person knows where they got to be. And you can kind of schedule it out in advance and actually get people putting money down up front.
So I'm getting, this is awesome. You're giving me an idea. So we've got our own social, right, for our van, and it's on Twitter, and we tweet out, we're going to the Rams game. Come and do your own like pre-game podcast, right? And you park like near the Rams game, you put up the location. Like, you'd have lines of people wanting to do that. The football fans that think they're better than, you know, Joe Buck or whatever. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we talked about like you could make the van a scavenger hunt. So like, you know how the YouTubers will do these big scavenger hunts or different companies, like the van itself, you could be like, okay, if you cite the van, take a picture, pin the location, and then like every month we'll randomly draw a couple of people to get a free podcast or something like that. Right. So then you make the van like a MacGuffin that people are chasing around LA.
On the Capitol side, what do you guys like? Website, social, like having that all spun up? What's that going to cost us?
I mean, probably next to nothing. Travis, what do you think?
Well, I'm saying if you can do QR code to like a form page, it could just be like a home page and then a form page. So it's like 2-page website. And then you could just go to a Stripe checkout page to collect payments and have that interact with like a Calendly or something that's managing a calendar, so you're not overbooking or double booking. You know, so it's just like, hey, do you want to record a podcast? You want to do it in the van?
Right.
Reserve a time. Like, it's a very simple, you don't have to understand
That's
a lot
true.
about it.
And just put in a deposit, right? Put in a credit card. Like, okay, because we'll get to economics here in a minute. Okay, so like, let's say 5K. It's all built. It's all, maybe you get logos done, right? I'm just kind of just on the front side, so someone else can come along and run it.
Yep.
Right. So let's just put $5,000 for that. Okay.
So in terms of running it, who runs this? Do we hire someone to run it? Do we run it? Like, what is that? What is there one person, one young mid-20s entrepreneurial hustler kid who we give a piece of the business to, who knows how to do all the tech, and we just say, this is your baby. You are going to get cut in significantly on the upside if this works. Go have fun. Check in with us every few days to start. Go for it. Hit us up if you.
I thought about this bit a lot. Right,
arrested.
So, like this 20-something tech kid, of which there are millions. No doubt we could find one. Probably someone could be listening to this like, oh, I would love to do that, and even just in our network, right? So that person, they need to live. I love the equity idea because I think I always love skin in the game, and they're tied to it, and but they're going to need like a couple $1,000 a month, aren't they, to just exist?
Yep.
To not have to drive Uber.
Correct.
Record. Driving.
Exactly.
We want to. Yeah, we want to give them. We want to give them a runway to be able to put all their focus on this.
Exactly.
Pretty much, right?
So
Yeah.
Like, so so I'm going to put 2,000 into our cogs, right? Because that's, wages.
Mm-hmm.
And this person is kind of going to be the one-man band, right? Initially. So he's got to be a marketer. He's got to be a tech guy. He's got to have some personality interacting with customers. He's got to be organized, be able to follow appointments. Like, it's a pretty unique person we're trying to find. They exist, but this isn't like you got to have those components in this person. They got to be able to be a multitasking, multi-talented person.
Well,
do you know who you just described, Dean? You just described a wedding DJ.
Yeah, there you go.
There
or
you
a photographer,
go.
right? Or right.
Well, but
someone
okay, but here, let's think of the one X factor, though.
Yeah.
I do want to think of one thing. This person has to be, for lack of a better term, ballsy,
totally,
because they've got to be driving the thing up, walking into a comedy club, trying to find the manager. They've got to go find the spot at the UCLA game on Saturdays at the tailgate, and pay the parking guy $100 to let him park the van. They've got to be like, they've got to have hustle, right? So that's an X factor. Where do you want that, or do you want technical? Like, what's more important, or do you need to pair two people together? Like, is there one?
I mean, ideally you want one, right, to start, because we're trying to keep costs down, monthly costs. Okay.
I would say hustle would be harder to
teach. It
teach.
is. It's natural.
Like 100%. The technical stuff it's like, here's how you connect a cable to a microphone, and here's how you press record. Like, that's something you could teach. But the hustle is like, you just gotta have that fire.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what other expenses have we got on the monthly? Cleaning, Starlink, gas.
So we had storage. We had, I mean, obviously, what happens if something breaks, right? Like, you need to just factor in
maintenance,
probably $1,000 a month for some sort of
maintenance.
I
think 500 probably is enough.
$500 a month in maintenance.
The upside of a van rather than RV, it's easy to park and put in your you don't want this on the street anywhere. You want it garaged probably, but to go and get a garage, even if you have to buy that storage, I'm going to put. What did you have for storage?
500.
Yeah, I think that's like worst case, right? We go and pay for storage in like anywhere like East Coast or West Coast. Okay, cool, like that. What else is on the monthly?
I mean, there are things like, we'll need, I don't know, Travis, from a tech standpoint, subscriptions, right? Like, okay, let's talk, like, obviously the input of the content, right? So things like Riverside, like these different programs, but that's not crazy expensive. And then if we do post-production on the back end, what are we talking from cost there, Travis, just to even be able to offer that? Is there any cost?
I mean, so it depends. If you have the person or a person associated with it doing the post-production, like editing at night, the stuff you record in the day, then you can kind of double dip there a little bit. But it ultimately, at that point, you run into issues of scale.
Right.
If you have a lot of people wanting that full service option, you're going to have to find a way to scale it up and down. So you don't want to build a bunch of overhead, because now you have a bunch of these clients doing full service, and then 80% of them decide they don't want to do it anymore, and now you have all these people you have to keep paying. So you'd want to have some kind of either connection with an agency where they have the capability of going up and down based on your needs, but also negotiating a rate that would be price competitive, so that way you're not losing your shirt by having to outsource it.
Let's just hold that for pricing for a second, because I got a couple of thoughts around that. Let me just keep on my cogs list here. Subs, like $250 a month for all the subscriptions we need to run this business.
Easily less than that, but let's
put 250.
I think I just think Vast, our subscriptions are like 100.
Right.
Between 100 and 120, and that's basically all we need.
Love it. Let's go 200.
Assume you get the enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All the software.
Is there any other monthly costs we're not thinking of? And maybe our listeners will like drop something in the notes here, but
yeah.
water for the towel.
I was gonna say, yeah, like little, yeah, I
Food-
mean,
food and
like
beverage?
Little
basics,
snacks.
water,
Yeah.
little couple $100 a month or $150 a month for stuff like that.
F&B
It's like,
200.
you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And do you want to get the water bottles branded? Like have custom
Oh, there,
like wrapping on the water bottles?
you guys. I don't do that. I don't do that stuff out until we're profitable. So you guys don't know me well enough yet. Okay. Is there merch, right? Or, you know, like you can just keep going. I think there's stuff that you go, let's just get some revenue, right?
Mhm.
And because this is the classic Dean Sweetman and bootstrap, you know, startup business. And so, okay, so I'm going to ditch the RV thing for a second because I think we're starting to get pretty comfortable with the van for a bunch of reasons: cost, storage, driving around, parking. Like I just
So here's the thing, not to burst that cheap van bubble.
keep pushing.
Maybe it doesn't matter because it just does. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Here's one for 34,000. Here's one for 29,000. So we're talking cheap, but I don't know if in the market we're in now, if there is what did you say, a $10,000 van?
Mhm.
Like I think we may still be talking between 30 and 50 to get something that's doable, which is better than 99.
Used vehicles are obscene right now.
I mean, here's a 2008 Dodge Sprinter with 100,000 miles on it, for $49,900.
There you go. Like, and we're not buying this thing in California. We're going to get it in like Nevada or something.
Yeah, this is in. This one is.
Exactly.
This one looks like it's in your neck of the woods, Dean. This is in. Utah.
I think all day we can get a van for $5,000.
All right, so Dean has decided he's gonna be the van sourcer. Well, so here's why I think this could actually be great, because RVs are also notoriously, bad at running. Like there's all kinds of things that break on them, and it could be like, oh, it's not the engine that's wrong, it's the generator to run the electricity is all jacked up, and now you got a 4-month lead time to get that fixed. But the great thing about this is if you start with the van and business starts
then you
go
next level.
You can easily add
Then you go do an RV.
You add an extra vehicle.
Exactly.
And now, and you can even tier the pricing based on what kind of vehicle shows up. So if you want the RV, it's an extra 50%, but you get X, Y, and Z. There's a number of ways.
You just got me a problem we have to fix. Power. How are we powering the studio inside this van? Is it like, do you have extra batteries, or do you plug into it?
That's a good question.
Power.
So let me look at this. So with a RV, you have power, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm thinking right, you have to plug in. Like I see RVs like with a cord coming out, plugging into a source, typically.
So you can run a whole podcast studio on batteries.
Okay.
You can. Okay. So you can run. So most podcast microphones are passively powered. So you just need whatever kind of mixer you're using to have batteries, and any kind of lighting
computer
to have batteries, and that's all standard computer battery. So you just have to be diligent about having spare batteries, so things go dead that you can charge them at home. But you wouldn't necessarily need active onboard power. You could use battery power for everything.
Okay. What if you had like one of Elon's like power packs on the roof, and when you took it home to store it at night, you just plug it in, and then you just plug into something like that.
Yeah, you don't really have to worry about it raining.
How much are those things?
I have no clue. Someone Google that.
Because just for the record, I want to say that Dean didn't like the idea of branded water bottles, but he wants a branded Elon power pack on the top of that. But I get it. It solves a problem. I get it.
It's awesome marketing, right? You think about these guys, like
that's true.
They're all Elon fanboys, or they used to be up until he bought Twitter. And it's like it's got a cool factor that's going to appeal to these wackadoo climate change people in LA. They're going to love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a green podcast studio.
Right.
Totally green.
Off the grid.
Carbon neutral.
What's the cost of one of those? My computer, I can't get in my computer right now. But anyway,
what is it called? It's a is that Starlink?
Powerwall.
Tesla?
Yeah, that's it. Like,
let's see. It is.
It's a race. It's a race.
Single Powerwall battery costs $11.5 grand.
Okay.
So twice as much as the van you found.
Okay, let's throw that out for now. Let's keep that for your 2.0. Let's go with some like regular batteries. Right, that you can plug into. They're not car batteries, but they're something like that. I'm just going to put $1,000 for batteries.
For batteries.
That's going in. That's going in initial capital.
And then you got to pay an electric bill to charge those.
Well, yes, exactly. So let's put in the cogs. $250 a month for electricity to charge the battery. I don't know.
I'm on the East Coast, so I have no reference point to
expensive,
California power.
I'm going to put $250. Okay.
And now we're not going to worry about rolling blackouts interfering with your recharge time, right?
In California, you may well be.
I mean, I don't know. We are in LA, so there's a lot of things to worry about.
We'll try and dodge that. Okay. Well.
Okay, so we've got an idea of the basic cost, right? Yeah. How big of an upside do we think? Like, what does this actually become as a business? Because it's not worth it for one van, and like you got to think.
You got to scale it.
Or is it?
Yeah, maybe.
You know.
Well, let's just say we're living in van life, 5, 7.5. Call that like 20. I think for maximum 30,000, this thing's a reality for the van option. So I'm going to put
30K in top line revenue, or
no, 30K in capital expense upfront. So we have to have $30,000 to go and put that in a machine, and out the other end comes a podcast van, right?
Yeah.
And so buying the van, wrapping the van, fitting out the van, getting the gear in the van, getting the batteries working, having it all ready to rumble. I think we can do that for 30K, right? And then I think the marketing, like the website, like, I think that's in the 30K, right? Because I went over on some stuff, and I think it's 30,000 to get the product. Okay. So remember last week we started to think, okay, let's back into revenue. And there was 168 hours in a week, right? This thing's not going to run 24/7. You're going to charge your batteries. So I think on the upside, there's potentially hours a day that you can run this business, but I'm happy to be challenged on that.
If you can park it and have multiple people come to the same spot,
you could do more.
You get more. You get more, right? But if you're having to travel through LA traffic in between each appointment, then that limits the number of.
That's a good point, because we talked about that. And right. So if you're talking about, if there's a 10-hour workday, you're really only doing 5 hours of recording, because you've got to get there and set up and you're doing a 45-minute podcast. So travel time and setup is 1 hour and 15 in Los Angeles all day, everything. And that's if you get them all strung together. Right.
So
yeah, but I wonder if you can just you could find like business parks, places where lots of people that are interested in this already kind of congregate.
Yeah, but so this is a bit of a different model, Mike, than we talked about last week, and I'm liking this model where, because of the marketing and all the rest of it, we literally go to a place and you bang out 4 or 5, podcasts in one spot. We didn't talk about that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have that as a pricing model for sure, right? The other thing I'm thinking too is like, I've been with kind of like my years doing like experiential marketing. You have like, does a brand rent this thing and brand it for a week at Comic-Con for $100,000? Like, that's a reality. A reality is you literally get a list of all the events within between here and Orange County. And you just start finding the sponsors at all these events, and you hit them up and say, hey, here are the 3 packages. We'll come and we brand the whole thing for you. I mean,
like rewrap the van, or like put their branding on the van.
Could be like it's anything, right? You put a premium on that, and then you've got an experiential activation for a brand at the Super Bowl. I mean, you name the event.
Well, let's.
I think that that could be a massive source of revenue also.
Let's call that phase 3 revenue. Phase 1 revenue is building the business and getting the buzz, right? And having enough to cover at least our expenses. But that's awesome. And you do have a lot of experience in that. Basically, renting out this van for high profile events and getting obviously kind of corporate tier kind of pricing.
Like a premium, yeah.
So do we think between and maybe like, it's like this thing doesn't go far from between West Hollywood and Santa Monica, right? And you know, the football stadium. Maybe it just stays in that triangle, which to anyone that doesn't live in LA could be 30 minutes or could be 2 hours, depending on the time of the day.
Right.
And let's say we could do some of this kind of park and record type scenarios. Do we think recording time per day, what do we want to do on the low end that we think is doable? I think it's somewhere between 5 and 10 that we could charge for. Do you think it could be more than that? Maybe this thing goes from 10 a.m. till midnight. I don't know. Maybe it goes much longer.
Yeah, it's right. You'd have different seasons within the day, right? So you'd have like the business recording stuff during the workday, and then you'd have like the dinner, like right after dinner break, and then you'd have like the super late night crowd, and you could basically just make sure that you're timing the location of the van based on the clientele you're serving at each of those different times.
I mean,
so you could stretch it.
Yeah, and if we're talking 7 days a week,
it'd be hard. It'd be hard for one
that's where I was
person
going.
to work that much all the time.
Where I was going. This just became a 2-person business.
If they get sick, how do you make sure you don't have to cancel all your appointments?
The good thing about that though is like we are, you know, there is a level of that in which it is that second person, it's a gig job,
right?
I mean, they're not getting paid; they're getting paid a fee for going to do it, right? They're not necessarily getting, they're not necessarily on a payroll, so to speak.
Okay, let's just throw in like another $1,000 a month for that for the gig worker. You think? Okay. Okay, and sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, let's just get a number, and then we've got to work out how much an hour we can charge, or how much a podcast, or how much for 45 minutes. Like, so if we think 10 hours a day is conservative, that we have to be recording stuff, however we've talked about it, and that's 70 hours a week, right?
Is there a demand for that much to start? I mean,
probably not.
Like, is that
right?
Yeah, I'd probably start, if we're doing conservative, I'd start at 5.
Okay.
5 hours
a day.
So 35 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
That's 140 hours a month.
And what did we say, like a podcast? Let me look.
Well, I want to know what Travis thinks what we could charge for this.
Oh, just to show up and record and give them the files, you could easily charge $100 an hour.
$100 to plug and play. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm looking here,
podcast. And that would be like competitive pricing, not premium pricing. That would be compared to if you go to a studio and rent a studio. $100 an hour is pretty common.
Yeah. So I'm looking here on this website. Like, so on Peerspace, there are a bunch of podcast studios that are anywhere from $200 an hour, $100 an hour, you know, someone's room in their office, right? Like, that's 100. I mean, I'm looking at one right here. It looks like it's a kitchen table, and it's $160 an hour. So there's definitely.
So if you had 100 as a floor to launch with, just so that way the price is not a reason people say no, and you have 140 hours a month conservatively, you're looking at $14,000 in top line revenue.
So you want the good news? The good news is I've got expenses to run this business monthly at about 10. And you just said, and then we just said 5 hours a day for startup at $100 is $14,000. So guess what? We made money. Now I'm going to throw in capital up front. I'm going to put some marketing in there. Right. So like to get the thing sizzled up, and you might have to like drive around for a month, right? And just park this thing and have people do the QR code and generate the buzz, and you're going to get the hustle. You're going to go to all the comedy clubs. You're going to go to the events. And like, you know, there's probably a month or two of like jacking this thing up before we get any revenue. So I'm going to add 2 months of 10K, right, before we have revenue. So my 30 to set up just went to 50, right, of just 2 months of marketing and hustle. That's what we're going to call that. So I'm up to 50 from as an investment to get my product built and then go and market it for 2 months. And then if I hit my minimum, I can generate 14,000 a month from there. And my cost of 10.
And then Travis, what do you charge for post-production?
So you would, for this kind of model, you would have per episode pricing and then like a monthly plan pricing, which you would make sure that the gap is enough that the commitment to a long-term plan is enough to comfortably cover your costs, but not so outrageous that it's like I would never even consider that. And so to do like full production, you'd probably be looking at like $500, $600 an episode to produce the thing.
That we could charge?
Just like, hey, we'll show up, we'll record it with all this professional high-end gear, we'll edit it, we'll give you the edited files, or we'll upload, like, we can work out the details about what exactly you do at those price points. But for $500 or $600 an episode, then you could comfortably cover editing costs, even if you had to outsource it expensively as you scale or to kind of meet demand. And then you could offer price breaks if they're like, we'll show up every week at the same time for an hour. And so you have that predictability, and you can kind of forecast out your revenue a little bit better. And you give them like, you know, buy 10 episodes, get 2 free, which is a common software price break, right?
So look, I think what we're hitting at here is like 14K in revenue is our low ball, and it's all upside from there, and our costs don't change essentially. Right. So we're literally, you know, this thing could generate easily double that. Right. Once it gets cooking. So this could be a 30K a month revenue business where on a quarterly basis. So this is a boutique business, I think. Right. Unless it scales like crazy and you have 50 of these, like maybe one day, but just think of it as a boutique business. You know, someone comes in, gives you 50K, you jack all this thing up, you give some equity to the kid, and maybe there's a couple of investors, and then essentially this thing could spit off 10, 15 grand in free cash flow every month. Right. I'm just trying. I'm imagining if someone came to me and said, hey, like, here's an idea. You want to put 25 in for 40%? And I'm like, okay. And this thing up to 6 months is spitting out, you know, 15K a month, and I'm getting a check every quarter, you know, for, you know, 20 grand as an investor.
Not a bad trade
deal.
I think I'm in. Like, it's worth the risk of the 25 days, what I'm saying.
Right. And that's 30K per vehicle.
Correct.
Right. When we're talking about, okay, now add a second van. Now you've got 30K a month in free cash flow just from 2 vehicles, right? And so if it scales linearly.
Right.
And then as it becomes more popular, assuming
love it, guys.
This is assuming things go well, right? And assume the comedy club thing works out. You can start off doing it for free, and then you say, hey, we have too many people asking for the van. So if you want us to park at your comedy club on your night,
it's going to cost you $5,000
for it to be there for 8 hours.
Right. 100%.
And so then you can have like people buying it in the day, places reserving it at night, diversify your income that way. So yeah, I think there's a number of ways you can make money from it. You're not just locked into one.
True.
So if one thing doesn't work, you can easily pivot with the same fixed costs and generate revenue in a different way.
So I guess lastly, 30 seconds, each of you, why doesn't this work? Like what's the reason that this just, or is there one? Like, is there a reason that this is just like,
you don't get the right person?
So
That's the biggest risk.
You think it's all the person?
Yep. Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because
so it's literally just finding the person to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you got to build this around the person, give them 20% of the equity, right? Get 2 investors to get, 40% of the equity to put up the capital. And literally this kid is going to cover his costs with a 2K draw and, potentially walk away like with another 10 plus K a quarter. So it could be $100,000 a year gig for a 27-year-old person that could do all this.
Mhm.
And then that's one van. And then he's in the company, right? And that guy's probably looking for other people like him to do the next van, right? And now you got enough cash flow to just cash flow the next vans. There's no more capital needed. You don't take a bonus every quarter. You go and put 50K and you go again. And so now this thing gets to 10 vans probably in 2 to 3 years if you wanted it. And that's a pretty cool business.
I love it. All right. Okay. So, I don't know. What's the next step? Do we do it? Do we try? Well, maybe we find a person. We got to find the person, right?
I think, this may be chopped up into 2 episodes, Mike, whatever you think, but, I think we need to, it's the holiday coming up, so we're probably having a break, but let's see what this episode does. And let's within our own network, kind of see if we can find a person. I think I know some investors, so, we'll track some of them down and let's do a business plan. Let's get all this down in two pages. And so we got it on paper. Let's just add a Google doc between the 3 of us, right? And we'll just jam it out. And that's it. We can find a person.
Honestly, from an investment standpoint, involvement standpoint, there are probably people listening to this show that could be a part of, so we'll just keep playing this out, see what happens.
It's been a great exercise.
This is fun. This is a lot of fun. Awesome. All right. Well, Travis, Dean, thank you guys.
Thank you.
We'll do this again and keep gaming this thing out. This has been fun.
Love it. See ya.